Good afternoon, Vanessa Maddoux. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's so good to be with you, Donna.
Well, I thank you for agreeing to come to the house and talk, even though we're not sitting in the same room. You've come to my house, and so thank you for coming and agreeing to talk to us today.
You've made it look really comfortable. You've got that beautiful picture behind you. It definitely looks like I'm in your cozy house. And here I'm in my cozy office, Donna. I've got my cozy curtains over here, even though I've got my formal desk back there. But
Well, I have a closet. I have a closet that I sit in, and my husband and I had a house fire, and we ended up in an apartment. We
oh,
lost everything, and God, we just have been in an apartment we never left. And so I made my little closet, the little back corner of my closet is my podcast area.
it's okay. It
And
looks cozy.
thank you. And the picture is my father-in-law is an artist, and he did the picture behind me.
Oh,
So
I love that. I do have some art around. You can't see. I only recently, I actually recently, I've been in this house for a year and 8 months, and I finally got my curtains put up, and I finally got the TV put on the walls. I still have a little bit of decorating to do here.
well, it's beautiful. I love it. I
Thanks.
follow you online, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, and so I watch your little things that you do on Facebook on the what do you call it, stories or whatever.
Stories. Yeah, I do the Instagram and Facebook stories all the time. That's new, by the way, new-ish. I've done stories before. Like I've been doing social media for however long social media has been out there, 17 years or so. But the stories thing, I would do every now and then or whatever. But when I started law school, I moved downtown Houston into a high rise, like, a fancy condo. I moved downtown for law school because it was right across from law school. And I started doing stories every day because people were interested in what it was like to go to law school at 50. So I started doing stories every day and I've kept doing stories. If people follow me on social media, they know the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, I wanted to have you on because again, I follow you, and I'm fascinated by all that you do, and I love it. And you and I've talked ahead of time, and so I know that you're in your 50s,
I am.
and excuse me, I'm sorry. And that you have recently gotten your law degree.
I did. I graduated and took the bar exam a few weeks ago. I'm still waiting on my bar exam, my scores to come in. I'm feeling like everyone feels, which is everyone is unsure. So we'll see.
Well, I've been praying for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I know. I'm still praying now. For those of you who don't know about the bar exam, which is, of course, the exam that people take to be licensed to practice law in their states, um, the bar exam has a written portion and it has a multiple choice portion. And the multiple choice portion, clearly, they can grade immediately, but the written portion, there's thousands of written exams that have to be graded, and it's like two legal documents and six essays of 500 to 800 words kind of thing, so it takes quite a bit of time. So we all just found out what the kind of average score is on those multiple choices, which was high, which is a good thing. So yeah, I'm anxiously awaiting these scores, but it's several weeks that you have to wait for them. So
Well, I'm excited for you, and
thank you.
I admire you. I have such admiration for you because it, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think it takes a lot of guts at you're in your 50s to pursue that. That's a lot.
Yeah, I
And
started I started when I was 50 and graduated at 53. I had just turned 53. And yeah,
but
it was quite a thing to go through law school and I was also going through menopause. I think I should
well,
get like an extra star or something on my diploma for that. And she did this going through menopause.
you have extra stars on your chart because I've been there, sister. I've been there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm still feel like I'm still going through it, the hot flashes and all of it.
Yeah.
But can you kind of take us back a little bit, maybe to your childhood, and
Okay.
kind of give us a view of what it looked like, but it was like for little Vanessa, growing up. I know you've told me that your dad was a pastor. Now, was he always a pastor? Was he, I mean, is that all he did, or was
So
he?
yes, sort of. Like he was always, I think he was, when he was 17, he started as the song leader at his church. They didn't call him worship pastors back then. But he was the worship pastor. That would have been in the 60s, 50s, 60s. Um, he, so he was always on staff at the church. And but he did work for DuPont, and this was in the Beaumont area. So he worked for DuPont while pastoring as well. So when I was born, he was pastoring. Goodness, was it called Victory? Yeah. Victory Assembly of God in Kirbyville, Texas. We lived in Vidor, Texas, which is outside of Beaumont. And
Hmm.
so we drove to Kirbyville on Sundays, and my dad pastored while he was working graveyard shifts too, so there were times he'd get home in the morning on a Sunday and we were loading up and headed to Kirbyville. So he had been pastoring there. He was pastoring there when I was born, but when I was 4.5, he took a pastorate in Winnie, Texas,
Hmm.
another little town between Houston and Beaumont. It's somewhat of a beach city. We were just like 7, 10 miles in from Crystal Beach. Little town at the time when we moved to Winnie, it had one caution light. There were probably a
Hmm.
thousand people who lived in Winnie. It was Winnie and Winnie Stoll.
Hmm.
Sum total of like 300 people from kindergarten through 12th grade. Like this is a small community, rice farming community. But when we moved to Winnie, Daddy, it was shortly after that, I believe, that he went full-time pastoring and not working at DuPont as well. And let's just say we defined the poor preacher's family. Like we just did not have much to speak of. And as my mom told us years later, we qualified for the lunch. Like we could have been getting free lunches, but my mother just couldn't bear that. She was like, "No, as long as I can, make you a sandwich and send you to school with something, you're gonna have food to eat." So, you know what? We were a poor preacher's family, but we were it was a happy home for me. Little Vanessa I was singing from the time I came out of the womb. My first memories of singing in church were in that church in Kirbyville. I would
Hmm.
have been probably 3, maybe 4. And they stood me up on the piano stool, and my siblings, we all stood up and sang together. And um, something just a little light, trite little song we sang. Life is filled with guns and wars, and everyone was trampled on the floor. I wish we'd all been ready. That's the first song I remember singing in front of a congregation. It was, this Larry Norman song about the end times, about the rapture. But then I moved on to things much more theologically deep, like I am a promise, I am a
I,
possibility, I am a promise with a capital P. Only I couldn't spell at the time and I thought it was a capital T. So, you know, fancy things. So little Vanessa was a very happy, busy little girl, very talkative. I know that's shocking to believe. Um, but just singing, very happy hearted, very tender to the Lord. I have memories of being quite young, and in small churches, it was super common, at least in our area, every little church I went to, even visited, at the end of the service, they would do some type of altar appeal, some type of appeal, obviously, for people. If they didn't know Jesus, you could come forward and make that kind of decision. But, you could come forward for prayer for anything. And usually the entire congregation would move from their seats and everyone just goes to that altar area and prays at the end of the service. prays for one another and different things. And I have many memories of being in the altars at such a young age and just crying and not really even knowing exactly why I was crying, but I was so tender, just responding to the presence of God in that moment. And honestly, probably responding to the emotions of what was going on in the adults that were in that altar who had real, real problems and real world issues. And they were really, experiencing something with God in that moment. But I treasure that, treasure um, just that real, pure, innocent experience with the Lord at such a young age. I walked the aisle when I was 5. We think I was 5. It was shortly after we'd moved to Winnie, and I was 5. So yeah, just yeah, that's little Vanessa. Little Vanessa is a young girl who's known Jesus since she was born, you know, but genuinely um, felt that conviction. And I used to say, I was like, I knew it was wrong when I took Barbie's head off. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. The idea of just taking that head off and trying to switch it up with some GI Joe boy, I knew those things were wrong. I knew what it was like to be disciplined by my parents. And so when I'm sitting in church and I'm hearing about sin and grieving the heart of God, and we know God made us where we feel conviction, whether or not someone's ever told us right or wrong. We know internally, it's wrong to kill another person. You feel guilty when you lie. Like there's those things are that God created us to have that kind of conviction. Um,
Mhm.
anyway, yep, that's I could talk and talk and talk about little Vanessa.
Um, okay, let's fast forward. You did you go to high school, in that area? Did you graduate high school there, or did y'all
We
move
moved.
to Conroe at one
Yeah, we
point?
live in, so my whole family now lives here in Conroe. So in 1983, we had been in Winnie for 7 years, and um, my my parents are precious, godly people, obviously being pastors, certainly the real deal. Like when people talk about, their horror stories of no idea what's dropping behind me. When people talk about stories of, it was one way at home and another place another way at church, and that really does happen. There are, it's unfortunate, but my parents were the same at church as they were at home. My daddy lived what he preached, and um, anyway, my father has always been a man of not just prayer but fasting, and I have those memories at that age. I was 11, 10 and 11 when the Lord had spoken to him that it was time to resign from the church there in Winnie, but he didn't have the next place lined up. And like I said, we were not rich people. We were not even middle class people. We barely had anything. And anyway, but my parents were obedient. Dad was like, no, this is what I feel like we're supposed to resign, and God's got a place for us. And for 11 months, we were without a pastorate, which means for 11 months, my my daddy had no job. We traveled, preached, and we would sing. I mean, as a kid, I thought that was fun. My sister Dana and I sang together, and we would laugh because back then it was cassettes that we used. We had these new things called soundtracks, and
Sure.
we would go. It was fun. One of the places in the entire Houston area that sold these things called soundtracks was the bookstore at Lakewood. This is back when John Osteen was still alive. Of course, we're talking the 70s, early 80s. And we would go to the bookstore at Lakewood, and it was a world of wonder because they had these soundtracks, and we'd sit and we'd listen and pick out songs and stuff to sing together. And so we would travel. Kind of didn't really understand that we were traveling because daddy was interviewing at these different churches, to be their pastor. Sometimes I was aware of it, sometimes not. But yeah, in 1983, we ended up coming to Conroe, which we thought I mean, as I told you, Winnie had a caution light when we moved to town. The Shortly before we moved from Winnie, they built a Sonic, which was so fancy to us. Otherwise, we had a Dairy Queen and we had a Minimax, the grocery store. Like there was no restaurant in town. There was a bar. Um, but we moved to Conroe. They had a McDonald's. Like they had a Burger King. They had, you know, they had restaurants. We just thought it was so fancy that we were moving here to Conroe. Conroe's grown so much since 1983, since it's been here. And the church, Dad became the pastor at First Assembly of God Conroe. That was 1983. In 1985, or was it 84? I think it might have been the next year. It was sometime, actually, it was the beginning of 1985 that they started Lifestyle Christian School. Now, it was kind of an impromptu. My mom had always wanted to start a Christian school. She really had a heart for that. Dad too, but really it's my mom's passion. And the plan was to start the school in the fall of 1985. But there were some circumstances not worth going into. There was like a group of people in the church and that had had their kids in a Christian school and they suddenly found themselves in need of a place to be, and they didn't necessarily want to homeschool. They knew that the church was getting ready to start a school, and so my parents kind of just threw things together so that it could begin. So there were 11 of us. I was the only one who wasn't kind of part of this other group of kids that needed a place to be. So Lifestyle Christian School started in 1985 and it's still going today. That's where I graduated from. The school grew quite a bit. I think at some point, I mean, we may have had 300 kids. That was big in the 80s to have 300 kids at your school, K through 12. And that's where I graduated from. Um, I ended up going to, it was called Southwestern Assemblies of God Bible College when I went. It's had
Mhm.
other name. It finally went to, they called it SAGU, Southwestern Assemblies of God University. Now it's renamed Nelson University. But I ended up going there. It's just north up in Waxahachie. I
Mhm.
went there for one semester. I really wanted to go to Oral Roberts University, though. That is, goodness, that's where I wanted to go. As a little girl, I remember getting up on Sunday mornings and I'd get dressed and be waiting on my mom to maybe curl my hair or something like that. And I remember my mom, walking around her bedroom in her slip, in her slip and getting dressed. And I'm sitting on the end of the bed watching the Oral Roberts show on Sunday morning, and those world action singers came out singing something good is going to happen to you. And back then it was Richard and Patty. We don't say that anymore, but because it's Richard and Lindsay. It's been Richard and Lindsay for a long time, but back then it was Richard and Patty, and I was watching that show, and I just, goodness, as a little kid, it was like, oh man, I want to go to Oral Roberts University, and I want to be one of those singers. And so after a semester at Southwestern, I ended up transferring to ORU and just it was the best experience of my life. Loved it. Loved it.
That's all. So you graduated from ORU then. You went for 3 years or
So I actually was on, this is, I did eventually graduate from Oral Roberts University. I've got that diploma on my wall right now that I'm so happy about. But actually, I stayed there for a year. And that summer when we were touring, it's a real thing. I mean, Oral used to talk about how they were sending these students all over the world, and they really did send us all over the world. It was a real thing. When the semester ended in the spring, a week later, there were probably 1,000 students headed all over the world doing missions work during the summer, and that varied for amounts of times, a month, 2 months, whatever. And of course, I
yeah.
stayed in the group that we traveled and represented the university, um, and we left. But the truth is, I was in college. I just wanted to sing. I just wanted to sing. I took a semester off after I graduated from high school. um, I was supposed to head to Southeastern, and it was the week I was supposed to be moving to Florida to go to Southeastern. And my parents and we were all just looking at each other going, I'm not supposed to do this. Like, I don't know we just knew like I wasn't supposed to go right then. And our worship pastor at the time was quite involved in the music industry. And he had a lot going on. And I'm telling you, I sang myself silly for about 4 months, got some good opportunity to travel with him and doing some different things. And so it was kind of a nice little break between high school, college. Eventually, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go now. I sang when I was in college, even at Southwestern and then at ORU. All I wanted to do was sing and do ministry. And I mean, that was just what was in my mind. So that summer, when we were touring with the singers from ORU, a friend of mine whose father was an evangelist at Lowell Lundstrom, very much like the Billy Graham Crusade ministry. As a matter of fact, the Crusade directors kind of would go back and forth from Billy Graham ministry to the Lowell Lundstrom ministry because they were pretty much the only two people in the US who did that kind of crusade ministry in a big way where you're filling stadiums and arenas and large auditoriums and things like that. And Lowell had been doing that for a long time. I live in the South. We didn't really know about the Lundstroms, but in the Midwest, people really knew about the Lundstroms. And they used to do ABC specials at Christmas and stuff. I don't know how I
Uh-huh.
didn't grow up knowing about that. I just was friends with their son LJ, you know. And so that summer while I was touring ORU, LJ called and he was like, "Hey, we need a soprano. Like we need a singer. Are you open?" And they literally pulled up in their tour bus while I was singing downtown Minneapolis.
Oh,
They
wow.
pulled up and I jumped on the tour bus to meet with Lowell and his wife Connie up there in the front of the bus. And the bus couldn't stay stopped. So the bus just kept driving. And all my friends that I sang with, that I'm still best friends with today, they every time we get together, they always laugh and they're like, "Yeah, and we were off singing, and Vanessa literally just got on a tour bus and left us." And so, and it is kind of how it happened. I mean, by the time that tour bus had made the block, I had agreed to go, move to South Dakota. That's where they were based. They had offices in just outside Minneapolis. I'm trying to remember the city that was, where we had television studios and recording studios in Minnesota, and then the ministry headquarters were in South Dakota. And I didn't go back to ORU. I moved myself to South Dakota, and Greg Long, that's where I started singing with Greg Long, who he was ultimately became a CCM artist, had a great solo career for many years. Then and still had a solo career while he was married to his wife, is married still, but while he was married to his wife, Jana, who was one of the founding members of Avalon. But ultimately, Greg ended up joining Avalon as well, and he and Jana are now worship pastors up in the Dallas area. Anyway, Greg and I started singing together in the Lundstroms, and I mean, he is a brother from another mother to me. I mean, we are bonded for life, and um, yeah. So I sang with the Lundstroms and did that, and I'm telling you, I loved that honestly, almost every day of the week, I was seeing people make a decision to follow Christ for the first time in their life. Um, and that experience working for Lundstroms and singing, we sang, there was a different theme every night, so there was God and Country night, there was the youth night, there was a family night where, he would preach about marriage and, oh goodness, there was a night where he talked about the second coming, and we had all these certain songs that we sang, these different things. But during the day, um, we go sing at nursing homes. We would go sing at schools. We would go sing at prisons. I'm just telling you, it was something new and different every day. But just like the Billy Graham Crusades, we go into a city and like all the churches, all the denominations, if you believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, the life, no one comes to the Father but through him, then you could get on board for these these crusades. And that was my first experience. ORU was very ecumenical, meaning there were all people from all different denominations were students at ORU. But that experience with the Lundstroms was my first experience going into churches from, like, you name it, Lutheran churches, Episcopal churches, a Baptist church. I was raised as Assemblies of God. I was a Pentecostal girl. But we would go Sunday mornings, Greg and I together and sometimes separately, but we would go spend our Sunday mornings going from church to church to church. And as soon as we'd show up at the service, like the pastor might be in the middle of his sermon, he'd be like, "Hey, well, we're going to stop here for a minute and hear a song from some special people." And we would stand up there and talk and encourage people to attend the revival for that week, the crusade for the week, and we'd sing a song or something. And I love that I got that experience because I carried that, just the focus on the central belief in Jesus. I carried that through my ministry life up through today and overseas, being able to focus on the things that we have in common, and the things that are not heaven or hell issues, meaning the things that aren't defining your eternal salvation. We can work those things out. We might argue over all those things till Jesus comes back, but they're not going to make a difference in your eternal salvation. They're just, and that's kind of how I view it. I mean, we pick the people that we agree with, and who we're gonna that's the community that we're gonna worship with on Sunday mornings, and that's fine. These are my personal opinions on that. Um, you know, but in the end, the central issue is, do you believe that Jesus is the only way? Because he told us he is the only way, the way, the truth, the life, and no man comes to Father God unless it's through Jesus. So if you believe that, we can work together.
Yes.
And
Amen.
yeah. So all that to say, I didn't graduate from Oral Roberts University in 1990, in the early 90s when I was there, because I left and I started singing and didn't stop. Didn't stop after that. I did go back in 2020 when the world shut down, and I couldn't do sessions. No, but I mean, you couldn't travel and sing. I mean, all the things that I did, that I had been doing for a living in my life at that point in Nashville, couldn't do it anymore. And I was sitting at home and nobody knew when we were going to be allowed to go out and about again. And I was like, well, this might be a good time for me to finish my degree. And so I kind of looked around to see what the best route for that to do that was going to be. And, going back to school at RU and doing that online and finishing online was the best choice, because for one, I was able to, keep all these credits I had earned. Anytime you start going to other schools, you're losing your credits, and, everything's not going to transfer. So I ultimately got that degree from ORU. But I loved my year that I spent there. And like I said, the friends that I had, that I made while I was there, they are lifelong friends. There's a group of girls that we get together on a regular basis. We try to get together yearly. Sometimes that doesn't exactly work out, but yeah, we're bonded for life for sure.
Okay. So going from there, now you talk about law school. My question to you would be, why law? What what has drawn you to law school? What has drawn you toward becoming a lawyer?
Becoming a lawyer. Goodness, it's such a, it's such, in some ways, a complex answer. Um, and the reason I say complex is because I've always had an interest in the law. That's always something that like interested me. But the compelling thing when I was younger was I just wanted to sing. Like that's what I really wanted to do. Um, but who I am as a person is way more than just a person who sings. And so I've always been a person interested in government and interested in the law and very involved. Like I was talking with my parents just the other day because I was talking about some of my political involvement that I've had through my life. I had a great teacher in high school who really taught us a lot about political science and government and things like that. And he ran for office, like for state board or something like that, while we were his students. And so we got to go to some different events and things like that. Obviously, we couldn't vote at that point, but we were just exposed to the civil activities that you could do as an involved person. Also, my uncle, Marlon Maddox, he had a show called Point of View. It was way before Rush Limbaugh was doing 3 hours worth of daily. I see your
Yeah,
face. You're like shocked here. Sorry, Marlon Max was my Uncle Marlon. And so Marlon had this 3 hour daily show. He talked about um, current events and things, how they affected us as Christians. And so, I mean, from the time I was in my early teens when we were going to Austin and sitting in the hallways while Marlon was speaking before the legislature on behalf of Christian schools, private and parochial schools, because they were trying to take away our right to, have this freedom within our education, which now having gone to law school, I'm thinking, why in the world did they ever think that they could take this right away from me? First of all, education is not a fundamental right. Anyway, let me get off that
uh-huh.
soapbox. But anyway, so I've always been very involved politically as a Christian, and did so even when I lived in Nashville and was part of a founding, I'm a conservative, um, and was a founding member of an organization that ultimately ended up being called Right Now, because the National Organization for Women was called Now, and we were called Right Now. And it was really a group of women and, coalition, if you will, to support conservative women who would run for office. And so, yeah, I just got involved in the political world. One of my best friends in life, her name is Cece Nolan Heil. She is the senior counsel for the ACLJ. And her job, honestly, is working on all the international affairs. And so, anytime there's a Christian who's been put in prison or yeah, imprisoned in some other country wrongfully because of their faith, because of being a Christian, that's going to be Cece's case. She's on it. She also deals with most of their pro-life issues. And so, and Cece has run for office several times, and I worked on campaigns with her. So I mean, it's kind of just been organically part of who I am to be interested in how the law affects my freedom as a Christian. And then as a Christian, caring just about people, caring about the community and these laws that we have and the laws that are created are either going to help people flourish or it can be burdensome in some kind of way. And I'm talking to you, property taxes in Texas. So, because the property taxes in Texas, I'm just telling you, it's a burden on the people. It's an undue burden on the people, and it particularly inordinately affects people on fixed incomes, and the idea that you work your entire life and that you're a prudent person and you've been diligent and you've put your money away and you've invested this way and you've bought your home, you've paid for your home, and you have planned and you have what you need to live on. And then because the property taxes, the values of your property end up rising, they keep escalating the value of it, even though they tell you, but we've locked in your rate. The values of these properties rise so much that all of a sudden this person who's worked their whole life, but now they're now on this fixed income, they can't afford to live in their house they worked it for their whole life. So how did I get to the point that I wanted to go to law school? See, I care about those kinds of things too. Just like I care about a person's eternal salvation, I care about people in that kind of respect too. So, one of my favorite scriptures comes from Psalm 119, and I should know it's 119 something, but it's the one that says, "The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul." So, just like us as Christians, when we know that law, it's that the law of God is the thing that shows us our sin. The law of God, that thing, don't covet your neighbor's wife, that law
Yep.
shines a light on that sin. If you are coveting your neighbor's wife, it shines that light on it. So just as I love the law of God and that the law of God is for my health and benefit physically and spiritually, I believe that the laws within our country should be the same for its citizens. The law should be for our benefit, for our health, for our freedom, and for our growth. And so, where the laws themselves might need to be changed, because they either were benefiting and they aren't benefiting now, or they've always been burdensome. That may be the case. Or we have laws that are great and good and they just need to be enforced. Let's just enforce these laws. So um yeah, all those things have always been inside of me. Wanting to fight for that underdog, that kind of thing is in me as well. Anytime I see actual injustice, you know, where the weights are not being weighed
Yeah.
equally, where justice is not truly being applied equally. Yeah. But for sure, I was raised in a family where the idea that just because you're a minister or just because you're a Christian, you can't speak about your feelings or your opinions when it applies to something political that affects your personal life. Oh yeah, we just blew right past that one. We're like, nope, nope, my rights are just as good as your rights. And just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean that my voice was taken away from me. As a matter of fact, thank God I live in a country that
Yeah.
they did want to protect my voice as much as someone else's. So um, I was in a conversation online. I try not to argue with people online. Really, it's always a losing situation, especially when you're arguing with strangers. Like, what's the point? But I was on the LinkedIn. It's like a business,
Yeah,
the
I know.
business,
Yeah.
the business socials, and there was a fellow alumni of my law school that was upset with because one of the professors at our school was appointed to a commission by the president, and this person just so dislikes our president right now that she really felt she had a lot of opinions about President Trump, and she was putting those opinions about him onto this professor, and basically, how dare my law school um, kind of allow this, because my law school prides itself on supporting diversity and things like that. And my point was to her was, what you're saying is you are pro diversity as long as it doesn't include this law professor's opinion. You can have all the everyone can have their opinion and support all the things they want to support, which is a variety of things that I don't support, but they should all have their right to support that, except for this one, unless you agree with this, unless this is your opinion, unless you have been appointed to a commission by the current president. And my point to this person was, there were lots of things that went on in the law school that I didn't agree with, but 100% support their right to gather and promote their point and their point of view. Like, I would never take that away from them, because I want my freedom too. I don't want someone restricting my point of view as a Christian. So yeah, go for it. Anyway, I could talk all day long about those kinds of things. And there's a lot about the law, the legal profession, that has nothing to do with politics at
Yeah.
all, but that's how I got compelled into this. But when I lived in Nashville for 25 years, worked in the music business for every single bit of that. But as most people who work in the music business, it's not their 100% income. There's definitely people in Nashville making 100% of their income sourced from the music business, and that's wonderful. That's great. That's not the majority of people, and it wasn't my story either. Even though there was a time I was considered there's um, the group called First Call, their
Yes.
name
Yep.
because they got their name because it was three people who they were first call session singers, meaning they were the people that got that first call. And then if they're not available, you go to the next one. There was a time I was in that first call group in Nashville for session work, and that was wonderful. But even when I was in that first call group of session singers, I still was doing other things to supplement my income. And sometimes I'm a single girl. There were a lot of other people that did that for a living, but they were married and you know, they had two incomes, and so they were able to make that work. But um, yeah, I don't know how I got started on that, but yeah, so all those years I was in Nashville, basically having a music career, doing some other things, but having a music career. And so the idea of going to law school back then, honestly, it did not enter my mind until 2005. And
Uh-huh.
or what, yeah, was it 2000? Yeah, it was 2005. And I know this because I found a folder that looked very much like this is a one of my legal folders, the file I'm working on right now. And I found a folder that had all the information of me looking up what I needed to do to finish my undergrad, and then information from the Nashville School of Law, because I was like, I think I'd like to go to law school. Maybe I could go to law school, because in my mind I could see how I could do what I was doing in the music world, but maybe I could go to law school and get this law degree. Um, and that didn't happen. Honestly, there's only a handful of people that were in my friend group that knew that I had even looked into that, because I kind of quickly figured out that I wasn't going to be able that wasn't going to work at that time in my life. Plus, who knows what happened? I mean, my life in Nashville, you could be trucking along for a while doing one thing, and then all of a sudden another door opens, and then you're working on that, because it's a constant thing of you're rolling with what the next opportunity is when it comes to music business kind of stuff. So um in 2020, when I started going back to school and ended up in 2021 back here in Conroe, Texas, had moved from Nashville. It was that fall, and I was sitting in the living room talking with my parents. And really at that point, like I was turning 50. I hadn't had my birthday yet, but like I was about to turn 50 years old. And I've just made this huge life change of moving to Texas. I was living upstairs in my parents' house at that time, and just having a conversation. I was like, what am I going to do for the next 20 years of my life so that the next 20 years I'm okay? Like we have clearly shifted in life. We're clearly doing something new and I've had a dramatic change in life. What can I do for these next 20 years? And what's so funny is I said I could either have an insurance agency, like I could go because I was working on this degree. I knew I was about to have my degree, and I was like, I could, insurance. I could have an insurance agency, because that once you build that up, that's residual income. As long as people keep buying insurance, and they always will have to, you basically are making your commissions, and you just build that up through the years. I was like, or I mean, I always wanted to go to law school. And literally, the moment I said I always wanted to go to law school, I mean, we all just kind of looked at each other, and I was like, I can actually go to law school. Like I could go, I can actually do that right now. And yeah, that was the fall of 2021. That conversation happened in September of 2021. I was leaving my pastor in Nashville when I left Nashville. His name is Lyndall Cooley. He's amazing worship leader. He was the worship leader during the Brownsville revival. If people know about Brownsville revival, he's a maniac. He's amazing. Um, love Lyndall, and Lyndall led worship every year for this conference for Perry Stone, and I would go with him to lead worship at this conference. So even though I lived here in Texas, I was going back to help lead worship for that. And I just remember before I left, and that's the first week in October. Before I left, I had signed up to take the LSAT, which is the exam you have to have before you can get into law school. And I had already started looking, because I'd figured out, I knew exactly what law school I wanted to go to, which was downtown Houston. And I was like, I'm not going to commute from Conroe to do that. I'm too old. I'll fall asleep driving back and forth. And yeah, so like I literally left to, by the time I got back to Tennessee for the conference, I remember showing up telling Lyndall, well, I'm going to go to law school. And he was like, what in the world? What in the world? So yeah, that's kind of the how that happened. Um, like I said, we're more than the job we have, I guess I would like to say. No matter what the job is that you're doing, that's a job. Even if you've worked that job for 50 years, you are more than the job that you have.
Yeah.
And I'm probably I'm just a good example of that because I've done way more things than what any job um, would define me as.
So, okay, from here, do you plan to start your own law firm or?
Probably ultimately, my brother-in-law is an attorney and he's an attorney here in town and has been for 30 years, maybe a little over 30 years. And initially, I wanted to go work for the DA's office, which I did short term, but I actually took the bar in February, did not pass the bar in February. So the DA's office, well, for one, I had to go start studying for the bar again. So I stayed on at the DA's office as long as I could. They really were desperate at the time, this particular county that I live in. They had a bunch of ladies out on maternity leave, and so they were really shorthanded. And they were like, "Can you stay?" And so I did. I stayed another like 6 weeks and worked as much as I could. But this is super common in the legal world. When you get that job right out of law school, they give you basically a good faith hire that you're going to pass the bar that first time. And if you don't pass it that first time, too bad, so sad. I mean, it's nothing personal, but you don't, most people don't get to keep that job. Um, and I just told my family the other day, I was like, man, I'm kind of wearing this. I took the bar for a second time, like a badge of honor now, because I do feel like I've passed it this time. But I said, I really want people to underestimate me. That's going to work to my advantage. There's a lot I could go into about reasons. I will, because you follow me all the time. I'm always saying my scores in February would have passed in July. There was kind of an anomaly that happened this past February with California not participating in the UBE, and it really skewed the scaling of it. But anyway, it is my experience. I'm now taking the bar for a second time, and that's going to be my story for the rest of my life. That it took me 2 times by faith, by faith that I've passed it this time. But anyway, so my brother-in-law has hired me. And actually, I'm going to say something right here on this podcast that I haven't told even my own social media network yet. But there's court appointments. You can get court appointments. This is in criminal defense. But here in the state of Texas, each county kind of handles how they do that a little differently. But for the most part, it's a pretty general thing in Texas now that you can't be like sign up to get court appointments unless you've practiced for 10 years. Because essentially they want seasoned attorneys representing the people who need a court appointed attorney, which you used to be able, it was the new attorneys that got those court appointments. That's how it was. Because a seasoned attorney, they're busy and it's just, a lot of them don't want to do it. Anyway, my brother-in-law, one of the judges, was just really imploring him. And they were like, man, would you please be a part of this program? And so he talked to the judge and said, I really don't have time, but my sister-in-law's coming on. She's waiting on her bar results. Because I've been around in that courthouse, they know me. Um, and the judge agreed. She's like, yeah, as long as you're this, basically, he's still the attorney of record. He will be the attorney of record, and I will be the associate who's handling those court appointments. So that's working out. That's going to start at the 1st of October. I get my scores sometime in the middle of October. So, we had to have some conversations this week about that. You and I were discussing connecting, and I was telling you, I was like, hey, I'm working on something right now, and can I get back to you later? And some of that was these conversations that I was having with him because that's what I'm going to be doing, which is a little tough for me because boy, I really got into having the prosecutor's heart, and now I'm going to be on the side of defending, giving people good representation in defense. But the blessing of that is that I do know, and this is pretty common, a lot of what they call the defense bar. It's just the defense bar is a representation of all the defense attorneys. There's a large percentage of them who have previously worked as prosecutors. And so it's good to kind of know how the prosecutors, the processes and the thought thought processes of a prosecutor when you are a defense attorney, because then how far you can push things and what's available. If there's like deferred adjudications that would be available to your client or not. You kind of know how far any particular district attorney is going to allow certain offenses to be dealt with, and every district attorney is different, every county is different. So, yeah, but when you asked if I'm going to be starting my own practice, I'm kind of going to be on a hybrid right now because I'll be handling those court appointments and working with John, but I'm going to be officing from right here. He has a lovely law office, and there's a conference room, and I'll go there to meet with clients and such, but I'll be able to work here from home. And yes, 100%, have my own clients and such. So I'm looking forward to that. It suits me really well, that, self-employed-ish with a mentor, someone really seasoned to kind of help me along as well. So,
I,
and
I,
I'm
I,
still,
I'm
I'm still leading worship at Houston's First. That's a huge blessing in my life. And
so
yeah,
excited. I mean, again, I go back to the age thing, and I'm like, thank you, God, that there's a woman out there. And I guess it's okay to say this, that you're not married, you're,
not
you
married,
don't,
never been married, not because I didn't want to be.
not, but that as we were talking earlier, and like my daddy would always say, I always go back to what daddy said, you don't let the grass grow under your feet. You
Mm,
don't You didn't just sit there, oh, poor pitiful me, I'm getting older. I can't do anything because I'm older. I love the fact that you're not doing that, that you are setting an example to me, to the body of Christ. You're setting that example. That's amazing. I told my daughter, I said, watch her, pay attention to her. I said, this is, how you want to be. I said, she's not letting, and I'm sure that it's not that you don't get lonely or that you don't like wouldn't want a house and set up house and with a, husband or whatever, but that you're not letting that stop you.
yeah.
Stuff. You're not just sitting there and poor pitiful me, but that you're getting up and you're moving and you're doing this. And I'm like, thank you, God. Thank you, Lord, for this example that we have. And
You know, I,
I'm
I had
proud
a,
of you.
I had a real kind of revelation, and I needed it. I had a real revelation that I really needed of just how brief this life is compared to the eternal life that we're going to live. And I don't know if it's just a perspective that I probably couldn't have gained until I was in my 50s. Um, because I realize now there's a lot of things that people that are my age now told me when I was younger, and I just didn't get it. Like maybe I I saw it at face value, but I didn't really know how to absorb it. There, when I would have been probably in my 30s, and my mentor in life when it comes to like women in ministry and just a woman that spoke into my life, is a lady named Carol. She's Carol Hardwick now. She was Carol Bryant. She was our women's ministries pastor at Christ Church in Nashville for years. And she just kind of took me under her wing when I was a young girl in Nashville, when I was in my late 20s. And she had been married before. It was, she's told her story, is she was in an abusive marriage, married to like a really well-respected doctor. Um, and she was in an abusive marriage, ultimately ended in divorce, of course, and she stayed single for a long time. And as a young girl I just yearned to be married. And yearned is the best word for it, because it wasn't like I want to be married one day. I genuinely wanted to build a life with someone. My desire for children had to do with that desire to be in love with someone who I thought was just the greatest thing since sliced bread, and that we would have kids together that were 100% me and 100% this person that I loved. And so my desire for that marriage and family came from those places. And so obviously I'm still single. That never happened for me, but that yearn like it stayed there for a long time. And I remember talking with Carol and just like because she was so content. I'm telling you, she was a picture of peace, and it really irritated me. Because I was this young girl looking at this woman. She's beautiful too. She modeled, like she was just everything you would want to be. Um, and she would tell me, she was like, Vanessa, she was like, I'm so content in the Lord. And I was like, I don't want to hear that you're content in the Lord. Like, I want you to tell me, like, how do I get content if I'm going to have to wait? Like, if this is going to happen later in my life, like, I'd really like to just know it's going to happen later so that I could wait so much better. And she's like, that's not how waiting happens. That's not how waiting works. You wait in faith, and faith is a place of trusting. And so you have to trust when you do not know. And yeah, the truth is now that I am almost 54 years old and haven't got married, probably not going to get married in life. I'm not saying it won't, uh, that wouldn't happen in my future, but I'm a realist, you know. And it is good that I didn't know at 32 that I wasn't going to get married one day, because I don't know. I think there were just I would have maybe given up on other things if I didn't stay in earnest about that. I don't know. God knows. But I always was just open to what God had for me. There was always a sense of that you and I talked before we started recording this about the latter will be greater than the former. I always kind of had this sense of no matter that God always had good plans for me. If it's not good yet, then God's not done yet, those kinds of things. And so in my life, I always just thought, well, the next season is going to be better than this one. It's just going to keep getting better. And it didn't mean that life was always easy, or even that the next better season was easy, but I always just trusted that in God's purpose for every season that I've been in through this. And I look back now at advice that Precious Carol gave to me, and it makes me smile because I think I'm telling young girls that now, where I'm like, be content in the season that you're in now. That season's going to change, and it may not. My life has never been anything that I dreamed. My life has been more than I dreamed. My life has been things I didn't know to dream for. My life has been things I didn't even, my life has been things that little 4-year-old Vanessa didn't know to dream of because they didn't exist at that time. When I was in Winnie, Texas as a little girl in my daddy's church and missionaries would come through, I'd cry, oh my goodness, my heart for missions and for people in these other lands. Imagine it's the 70s. There's no internet, there's no social media. Missionaries went to other countries, and every 4 years they came back to the States. And the only news you heard from them at that time was a letter that came, maybe a letter twice a year. Maybe that missionary would call back home once because it was so expensive to call. So when missionaries would show up at the church and they're telling their stories, I was so compelled, so fascinated. Never, as a little kid, did I think, I'm going to grow up to be a missionary one day. It was still always, I'm going to sing for Jesus. That was always what was in my heart. But I was very moved and very compelled to every missionary. I didn't know when I was 4 and 5 and 6 years old that 30 and 40 years from then, I would be doing the work of a missionary without having to move to some other foreign country. And amazingly enough, that gospel music itself would be the best and most effective evangelistic tool in a country like Japan that I had never even dreamed of going to. And yet I go every year now, and I've been doing music missions in Japan since 2011 and have built great relationships there. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't know to even dream to do those things. So Yes, in life we experience disappointments and it may not turn out the way we wanted to. I certainly had planned to be married and have a family and stuff, but it would not benefit me today to be sitting in my living room eating bonbons and crying and not moving on in life just because it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to be. God has done infinitely above and beyond whatever I could have hoped or dreamed. And that is what I embrace today. It is not going to help me for me to just sit and think about all the things I wanted and didn't get because I woke up today breathing. My heart is still pumping. There is still life to live. And when this life is over, none of this is going to matter to me. I know we tell stories. There's movies. There's movies about people going to heaven and coming back and all the things. I am not going to care one lick about anything that's happened in my life when I am in heaven and I'm with Jesus. When I take this last breath, it's the last breath I'm going to take. And all of these worries and woes and concerns and, well, God, why didn't I get married? Why didn't I have kids? Every guy I dated is married and had kids, has kids right now, and all that. That's it. It just doesn't matter. Like, why would I think about that? Why would that even matter? Today is what I have, and today is what I'm going to do something with. And, if God allows me to have it tomorrow, I'm going to show up at church. I'm going to lead worship. I'm going to go have lunch with some of my friends from law school. And I'm going to continue to be as much of a light to them as I can be, because what matters in my life today is how much Jesus am I sharing with people? How much life am I bringing into someone else? Because while I'm still breathing and I'm still here, I got everything Jesus has for me. And you know what? I've said before, because I've been poor. I've been the po where you can't even finish the word. Don't even have the or. We po. I said, you know what? If I lost everything, I could move to the middle of nowhere, get a job flipping burgers at Dairy Queen, eat myself a dilly bar, go live in a trailer somewhere, and I could live. I would still be alive. It doesn't matter if anybody in the world ever knows who Vanessa Maddoux is, that is worth nothing. It is literally worth nothing. What matters is my eternal life. I love my family. I believe as a Christian that I have a responsibility to love and care for my parents. I mean, speaking of God's law, one of those 10 commandments is to honor your father and mother. And it comes with a promise that if you do so, you'll have long life. My parents honored their parents and they're having long life. I live next door to my parents and I'm going to be here as long as they're here because I'm here to honor my parents. That's a part of my calling in life. But you know what? While I'm doing that, I'm still leading worship at church. I've got this new law degree. I've got a recording session I got to do in 2 weeks. Um, I we called it slinging fragrance. I worked in the fragrance business. I still wear fragrances, and I got myself a little TikTok where I talk about fragrances. I am living life while I am here on this earth, and I'm going to do what I can to be a contributing part of my community that I live in. Um, I'm going to do what I can to tell the world about Jesus, to share the gospel everywhere I go, whether it's, like I said, sitting in a restaurant in Houston, Texas with friends who don't know Jesus, or taking it around the world and sharing the gospel in Japan and other countries. So I have no reason to stop. I mean, I'm alive. Let's do something with it.
Well, sister, this again, um, I just, I'm just so grateful that number one, that I've gotten to know you,
Oh,
and God has allowed our paths to cross because I'm a better person for getting to know you.
oh,
And I'm very, and I have a question for you here. Is there, if someone wants to reach out to you and has a question about going to law school,
sure.
um, about just has questions in general, maybe about music, about whatever, is there any
Sure.
way, is there a specific way they can reach you?
Sure. I mean, there's vanessamaddox.com. That's my website. But the best way to reach out to me is on social media because I'm on Facebook and Instagram. That's really the main places where I'm on. So yeah, just send me a message on my Facebook or Instagram. Um, I used to travel more as far as like going and singing and ministering in other churches now. Um, like I talked about different seasons. Now I'm in a different season where I am one of the worship leaders at Houston's First Baptist. And yes, the Baptists let this little Pentecostal girl be there and be one of their worship leaders. I love them. I love my church. I love my community. So I'm there every Sunday, leading worship in Sunday mornings. I do still travel some, uh, singing and ministering in different churches or other events, like special events that aren't happening on a Sunday. Now, with my new legal career, um, the good news is I can still be somewhat flexible. When I have court settings and things like that, I have to be there. But if there's something I need to leave and do, obviously working with another attorney, it helps. The fact that I'm working with my brother-in-law because we can kind of help cover each other. So yeah, so I still, am open to being scheduled and booked for singing and ministering. There's a couple churches that have booked me for I actually do preaching. Don't tell the Baptists I preach, but
Sure.
yeah, don't tell them I do that. Um, so yeah, but social media is the best way to connect with me. And then obviously if people need an attorney and you're in the state of Texas, I'm open for that too. So
Well, I want to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for coming to the house. I appreciate it.
yay, Donna, it was fun.
And can I ask you a question? Would you mind taking us out in prayer?
Sure, let's do it. All right.
Okay.
Jesus, I thank you so much for this opportunity to sit with my sister Donna, my sister in Christ, and to just talk and share about life and how you have so guided and influenced and cared for both of us actually through our lives. And I'm thankful, I'm grateful for this time. Um, I thank you that you are always leading, you're always guiding, and that you truly are Emmanuel, that you are God with us. So when I wake up today, you're with me. And when I go to sleep tonight, you're with me, and you're with me through my day. And when I have questions, you are right there with me to guide me and to give me answers and to point me to the right person that I need to talk to or to show me what it is that I need to do to get me to where I need to be. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the leading of the Holy Spirit and your ever present nearness. I feel your nearness, and I ask that everyone who's watching this, and for people who watch it in the future, whether it's tomorrow or 3 years from now, that they would be encouraged by the nearness of God, that your presence is ever ready and waiting, that when you call on the name of Jesus, that immediately you are here because you are God with us, you are Emmanuel, and that you are ready and willing and there for a relationship with us. So I thank you for that. I pray that everyone who watches this podcast or listens would be encouraged that they too can have relationship with Christ in a way that they have confidence in their eternal salvation, and also would be encouraged to live life to the fullest every day because there is purpose in life. And God, you have a plan for each one of us. And as long as we're breathing, there's still purpose in our lives. Thank you for that, Jesus, in your name. Amen.
Well, thank you again, sister. And I hope you have a blessed day and talk later.
Yes, yes. Y'all have a blessed day too.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.